everyone. We're gonna get started. Thank you for coming to Civil Cafe, Access to Early Childhood Education. I'm Megan Tagami, and I'm our education reporter for Civil Beat. Just a couple quick housekeeping things before we get started. A friendly reminder to silence your phones because this event is being recorded. Bathrooms are outside to the right down the hallway. Parking validation should have been taken care of downstairs, but if anyone still needs it, you can go to someone in a Civil Beach shirt and they'll help you with validation. If you have a question for the panelists, please write it on a flashcard to submit in person to Civil Beat staff, or if you're watching the live stream online, please submit it in the Q&A section of the Crowdcast stream. And thank you all again for attending this community event and supporting Civil Beat's work. I also want to say thank you to the organizations that are running booths tonight. Please check them out in the back if you haven't already. We have staff from YMCA and Hawaiʻi Children's Action Network. Thank you guys so much for being here today. Affordable access to quality childcare and preschool is so important to Hawaiʻi families, especially with our high cost of living. It's a growing topic of discussion in recent years. The state has set an ambitious goal to provide all 3- and 4-year-olds universal access to pre-K by 2032. That means Hawaiʻi needs to create nearly 340 additional classrooms by 2032. And with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists for tonight. I'm joined by Ben Naki, who oversees early education programs at Parents and Children Together and serves as president of the Head Start Association of Hawaiʻi. Head Start is a federally funded program supporting the early learning of kids ages 0 to 5. We're also joined by Sylvia Luke, who is Lieutenant Governor of Hawaiʻi. Lieutenant Governor leads the Ready Keiki initiative, which coordinates a statewide effort to provide universal access to pre-K by 2032. And we're joined also by Jeff Bock, who is director of the UH Mānoa Children's Center and president of the Hawaiʻi Association of the Education of Young Children. Just to start us off, maybe a question for all the panelists. Could you talk a little bit about the importance of providing affordable access to quality childcare and early learning for families, and what quality education does for kids in terms of their development and preparation for kindergarten?
Hello, everyone. There's a lot of research around brain development for the first 5 years. And so, ensuring that kids have access to any type of early learning program. It could be a center-based program, home visiting, family-child interaction learning program, but giving them opportunities to learn to find out where they are developmentally and get them ready for kindergarten. That's pretty much what all of our early learning programs is getting them as well as the family ready for kindergarten.
We know during the pandemic when access to early childcare was really difficult. We know that when you don't have access to early childcare, family violence goes up, the ability to identify developmental delays goes up. We need to be able to stabilize families, and early childcare actually stabilizes families in addition to supporting the sorry, thank you, the brain development and just making sure that the child is healthy. We're actually making families healthy.
First of all, let me just thank Civil Beat for hosting this event. The more we learn about access to both childcare and free public school education, free preschool education is really important in the state of Hawaii. Preschool access has been an aspirational goal for the state of Hawaii since I was in high school, and I graduated from high school 40 years ago. And so think about how many kids we left behind for 40 years. And there are people in the audience who've been working in this issue and in this circle for many, many decades. For me, in addition to what both Ben and Jeff talked about, the initiative, the Ready Keiki initiative, started as a cost of living issue. And it was really about what does it take to live in the state of Hawaii, and childcare and preschool was one of the highest cost of things, including owning a home ownership, housing costs, transportation costs, taxes, and all these things. And so if we wanted to uplift the entire community, we thought, okay, childcare and preschool access, in addition to all the educational benefit, had to be in a top of mind issue to tackle a cost of living issue for the state of Hawaii.
That makes sense. I feel like talking to so many families for stories, a lot of times they bring up, we want to live in Hawaii, we want to stay in Hawaii and raise our families here, but the cost of living and especially the cost of childcare is really, what's getting us right now. LG, I'm going to direct this question for you because I got the numbers off of Ready Keiki's website, but it says that Ready Keiki estimates that we need around 340 more classrooms to reach the state's universal pre-K goal. And I was wondering, could you share a little bit more about what the plan is for adding these classrooms in the next 7 years or so?
When I took office as Lieutenant Governor, thanks to the governor for allowing me to work in this space. This is something that I was passionate about even when I was in the legislature. And when I took office in December 2022, going into January 2023, the Ready Keiki initiative was born with the idea in fulfilling the mandates of the legislature, which is by year 2032, we needed universal access to preschool education for all 3 and 4-year-olds. At that point in time, my staff and myself, we are very data-driven and we're very intentional about what this means. How do you expand preschool? And one of the things that we did not want to do is we did not want to supplant what was in the private sector, because we have really high achieving private preschool. We have high achieving Head Start program. Even the Children's Center, we have a lot of thriving preschool classroom in the community. So if we wanted to expand public school preschool, we did not want to just kind of replace what's going on the private side. So for us, when we decided to launch the Ready Keiki initiative, we did the numbers, and based on the population and the number of 3 and 4-year-olds, we estimated at that point we needed 435 classrooms. It was about 9,000 kids. 2 years later, thanks to all the work by many of the partners, including EOEL, SFA, including the private sector, including so many other partners, the new numbers, we have the newest numbers. It's actually going into 2025. At that point in time in 2023, the underserved number was 200 kids, about 465 classrooms. The new estimated goal is only 295. It's not only, but we were able to reduce that number just by building more public school spaces, providing support for private providers, having initiatives that marry housing and pre-K options. So we're very thankful for so many partners working together to make this goal.
And I think we're going to be talking about it a lot, the private sector versus public sector versus Head Start. Would any of you mind just clarifying really fast for the audience what that means and what's the difference between all these options? Because I think a lot of people think of preschool and they have one set thing in mind, but the options have evolved a lot in Hawaii over the past couple years.
Okay, I'll go. So I can speak on Head Start. We're a federally funded program, and so it's interesting because if we're federally funded, it's kind of a public program. However, the money it's one of the few federal programs that is the funding goes from federal to local programs. So there's 6 Head Start grantees in Hawaii that provide services, and so it's the work that our Head Start programs do in all the counties is traditional center-based care that most everyone is familiar with. Home visiting, which includes group socializations for the home-based families to come together twice a month and socialize, and they can interact with peers. And then also lately we've been doing a lot of partnering with family childcare home providers on Oahu, and I know Maui Family Support Services is partnering with family childcare home providers in providing some funding for them to implement early Head Start in their classroom, in their home environments. And then the last is our agency, PAC. We were one of the only providers that applied for a childcare partnership program back in 2015. So we have this kind of unique partnership with Kaumaina Kids, who's a very large childcare provider in the state. And we partner with them to contract them to do pretty much the education childcare services while we provide the wraparound services. And that's what Head Start brings is a pretty unique piece of our program is while we're working on the kids in the classrooms, we're also talking to the families to see what their needs are. You know, we serve a lot of families that are in very vulnerable situations, dealing with trauma. So we have these wraparound services that can really address the health, get them engaged in their child's programming, even leadership positions for the parents to really have a say in what do they want to see in the curriculum, what do they want to see in the work that's happening. And then we also leverage the different agencies that we partner with on mental health, children with special needs, working with the DOE Special Education Department, and then also early intervention. So that's kind of the work that encompasses Head Start as being a federal program in Hawaii.
For private sector, you have a friend family network, so you're operating out of your house. So that's one thing. You have family child interaction learning, so FCILs, like what is it? PID. Yeah, PID. Yeah. So those things actually help the families, support the families, but they center on in the instance of getting a friend or a neighbor to help out with their childcare. That's care. And there's an educational component that needs to step into that. And we need to find a way or mechanism to help support that so we can help identify needs, special needs, unique needs, and move the family forward in a different way. We have a whole bunch of private childcare providers, a whole network of them, and they're all over the place. Places like the Ready Keiki organizations being in the public school system don't necessarily supplant those. There is an opportunity for us to be able to work together to build a much larger network, and we're in the process of doing that. But the friends and family, the home care has to be part of that discussion. We have to figure out a way of putting all of those things together.
So a lot of people think that the Ready Keiki initiative is really about just on the public side, building more public preschool classrooms, and it's not. Ready Keiki initiative is about everything. It's about building more public preschools, helping private providers, ensuring that we have co-located spaces where whenever we build affordable housing, we have to think about, is there a childcare alternative or preschool on site? And we're having all these discussions because we are flipping that discussion, because we have to think about it from the point of view of the parent. It's been a long time since my son was in preschool, but I remember when I was deciding whether to send my son to preschool, I'm embarrassed to say, but I searched the preschool who had the latest pickup time. And I thought, okay, you know what, if a preschool is offering a pickup time, shockingly for the preschool that my son went to, it was 7 p.m. And how rare is that where you have preschools that provide that kind of option? And so public preschools don't have that option, because at least for pre-K, you have to still stick to how the regular class hours are. So, it's either 2:15 or 1:30. And for some of our working families, that's not going to work. So the only option for them is the private sector. The other factor is in remote areas, for instance, the east side of Molokai, there are no private providers. It's not economically feasible for a private provider to go into the school out in the east side of Molokai, which is Mauna Loa. So that is really our responsibility, the state government's kuleana and our jurisdiction and our responsibility to locate those areas where private preschools will not be able to go in because of different challenges, whether it's workforce challenges or whether it's cost challenges. So we are making an effort to go into Na'alehu or Pauilo and, certain areas where it's not an option. So that's why we're very intentional. We look at the wait list on every school. We look at where the private providers are, and that's why we're maximizing the number of preschool that we can build out.
That makes sense, definitely. I was wondering, we talk about having private options, public options. Jeff, I'm going to direct this question to you. I was wondering, could you talk a little bit about how we can make private preschool or tuition-based preschool a little bit more affordable for families? I know the state has been trying to work with subsidies and increasing family eligibility for those subsidies, but I was wondering if you could share a little bit about what you're seeing at the Children's Center.
Increasingly, that's a huge issue because costs are continuing to rise. Even closer. Oh my gosh. I've never had anybody want me to be louder. The cost of childcare is huge. And in part, that the driver of that is that we're simply not paying a living wage to childcare providers. So that's an issue. The average starting pay for a childcare provider in the private sector is about $34,000 a year. The average starting pay for an elementary school teacher is about $54,000. So it's a big difference, and that continues on through the cycle of your earnings cycle. So the driving force is really how we're paying people and how we're respecting people who are providing these kinds of services. The DHS rule change is huge. It is moving to 500% of the federal poverty line is really a huge step for a lot of families. They're going to rely on these kinds of subsidies in order to pay for ever increasing childcare fees. The federal government says that your childcare fee shouldn't be more than 7% of your income. But here in this state, it's about 18% if you just have one child. It's about 27% if you have two children. So it's a huge chunk of your pay going to this. So somehow there has to be some additional support or stabilizing issues to be able to make it affordable. But the cost of childcare is still going to be the cost of childcare. It's how you address that cost.
And just to clarify, the DHS subsidy you're talking about, this is the Preschool Open Doors subsidy?
Yes. And that is super important. We're talking about things like stabilizing childcare because we're losing so many of them because they can't operate under the margins that they're being given. So having these kinds of subsidies allows them to charge an authentic rate that actually makes them sustainable while taking that cost away from the family and starting to at least a portion of that, moving that to the state for the support.
In terms of talking about support and making sure programs are financially viable, I know there's a lot of talk about federal changes and possible federal funding cuts. Ben, could you share a little bit about if Head Start in Hawaii has been impacted so far, or what are some of the concerns for Head Start moving forward?
Yeah, great question. So fortunately, Head Start is one of the programs that was identified for cuts with the new administration, and the FY25 monies, all of our programs in Hawaii were secured, and we're now looking at FY26. It was flat funded. So which comes with some challenges being flat funded, because like Jeff was talking about with inflation and just the cost of expenses, overhead and whatnot. If you're flat funded, those costs still go up, but you're still getting the same money, right? So as far as impact, Directly, no, not right now. However, I just had a meeting with the other directors, and we're continuing to try and retain staff. The workforce piece is obviously a big piece in order for us to be able to keep classrooms open or even make sure we offer those home visiting services. And that's always been a challenge. More so now, because the market is a lot more competitive, but also, again, with the flat funding rate. So if we can't increase pay year after year, staff have to make a decision. Like, I need to make a living. This might not be where I'm going to be at and whatnot. So it's with federal funding, we are cautiously watching kind of what the next direction, what's going to be, if we got to make any pivots or anything like that. We're also looking at just different opportunities to kind of foresee what direction the administration will be heading toward. Obviously, with RFK being the DHS HS director, nutrition is one of the big efforts that's being pushed through. And recently, there was an RFP for Head Start programs to apply for supplemental funding to address nutrition efforts for the family. So we can kind of project in which direction we might be going. And I think we just need to be ready and prepared, kind of, and advocate, of course, for the federal funding to stay in place and not drop. So we're very fortunate. The funding has leveled out, but we really want to make sure. Again, I want to kind of piggyback on Jeff around the staff wages, because our fear is if we cannot pay staff a living wage, they're gonna go look for a job that can support them and their family. And we have, like, I look at my teachers every time I go to a classroom. It's just these are amazing people because they work long hours even beyond the time that they're here. They really invest in their development, their professional development, knowing that there might not be a raise and whatnot. And so, like, our program, we try to incorporate raises every year. If the federal government can give us a cost of living adjustment as part of our base contract, that helps. But again, this is the first year, I want to say, in since 2008, I want to say, that Head Start did not see any type of cost of living adjustment across the nation. So every program across the nation has to work with the same funding they had last year, despite the increased costs. So
that makes sense. That's a really comprehensive update. And just to provide a little bit more context, Head Start is the largest provider of early learning services in Hawaii, right?
Yeah. We serve we're funded as a state about 2,800 slots, and 700 of those slots are for infants and toddlers. And again, I talked about it earlier. It's not all center-based. The Head Start, the 2,800 minus 700, let me do the math, 2,100 slots, that's traditionally all center-based. The 700 early Head Start slots, a lot of them are home visits where people come into the homes and whatnot, gives people an option. Because we know, like, parent choice is key, right? We want to make sure there's all kind of options in Hawaii for families, because there are some families that want to keep their kids home, but is there a resource that we can pass on to families, right? And home visiting is one of those resources that we can pass on to families that choose to keep their kids at home with grandma and grandpa or mom and dad, they alternate or whatnot. So yeah, 2,800 is how much we serve statewide.
I'm going to open up this question to everyone. And I think Jeff alluded to this a little bit earlier, but I talked to some private preschool providers and they tell me, we have such a great demand, we have a huge waiting list, but we're not able to keep some of our classrooms open because we just can't find teachers to staff these classrooms, even though we have more than enough kids to fill the seats. And I was wondering, could any of you talk a little bit more about what's being done to recruit and retain teachers in this space? And like all of you have alluded to, also, pay them a living wage.
That's a really complex question. Part of the issue is you can get a higher pay someplace else. So finding qualified people that have been able to go through things, through the regulations and the training and all of that. They actually are well-trained people that could go into the DOE setting, and we saw that during the pandemic. So many, like 15% of our childcare spaces closed and never reopened because they didn't have the staffing to be able to bring that in. There are lots of other issues at play with that, and part of that is the regulation. So it depends on what kind of license you're talking about, depends on what kind of training you have to have in order to sort of be in that center. We're getting ready to open 1-year-old classrooms and expansion classroom, which means that we have to have 2 licenses, one for the preschool and one for the infant toddler. Those regulations are completely different. The training requirements are not the same. You need to have 2 years of experience in an infant toddler license, and the same teacher teaching 2-year-olds under a preschool license only needs 1 year of experience. The CDA, the Child Development Accreditation piece, counts for 12 credits under a preschool license, but only 10 credits on an infant toddler license. So it's hard to just make that expansion because you have to figure out all of those things. Those are all barriers to being able to sort of move things forward. The state is taking certain actions. For instance, we have the early childhood and care and education degree at the university. That allows us to give credentialing from birth all the way to grade 3. So that resolves a lot of problems. We don't have to get the retraining, but we have to get re-fingerprinted every time you move from one place to another. Within our staff, we have to re-fingerprint our staff doing exactly the same job, but re-fingerprinting them just to operate under the new license. These barriers help add to the complexity of those issues. It's not necessarily that you can just open more preschools. You have to define what those preschools are, what they're doing, and sort of make it easier for programs to be able to make those changes.
Yeah, I wanted to add. So one of the way we recruit staff and is through the parents that participate in our program. So I want to say nearly about 20-25% in some of the Head Start programs are former parents in the program, right? So it's great. Like we have people that are utilizing our services. We see if they're interested. We have them volunteer and see if this is their cup of tea, right? And so and fortunately, Head Start, a portion of our budget we have to spend on professional development. So one of the things we can offer is, hey, you come work for us. We'll pay for your education. We have the money. We'll pay. We'll give you time off. Whatnot. We'll pay for it. The hard part is that what we've noticed is it's not easy for somebody to just go back to school and take a class, and now take a class online, right? So you have to be able to get on a computer, log in, do your assignments online. That's not what some of the parents that we have, or they might be, or even like grandmas and grandfathers, they want to do that. That wasn't the way they learned, right? It was in person in the classroom. So, and we've seen some parents that they need a little bit of coaching in order to get them through coursework and whatnot. And so I want to say maybe about 8 years ago, maybe a little longer than that, we built in coaching positions just to help teachers instruction in the classrooms, but to also support the staff that want to go back to school, our aides that want to go back to school, take a class, kind of see how it is, see if they can actually take on that, because it is additional, right, to what they're already doing. So it's the professional development piece is important, but it's not easy. It's not easy to get the 3 credits and work a full-time job, and I got my life at home, right, with the kids, and things you got to do. So there's the system shows you what you have to do, but it's not necessarily easy for everyone to take those steps. And that's the part I think we're learning, is how do we support people that want to get into the field and won't get discouraged in the process, because it is a process. And again, it's a process that you have to take on while you're also working. So that's always the case, right? Yeah.
Definitely. I think we talk a lot about how online learning was a challenge for kids who are currently in school, but we don't think about people who are also returning to school and want to, specifically help out their kids or their community. Just a quick reminder, we're at 30 minutes, so if anyone wants to send in questions, either on the Q&A function on Crowdcast, or write your questions on flashcards and give them to a CB staff member, now's the time to do it. LG, I'm going to direct this question to you, and this was a question we got pre-submitted before the panel. Someone was wondering what, if anything, is being done to make preschool available to children who are in school districts where there's no space to add a public pre-K classroom.
Thank you for that question. So far, for public preschools, we've been maximizing unused spaces in the elementary school. And because of that, we've been able to open a lot in a very quick amount of time. At some point in time, the unused spaces will not be available because there are certain schools, for instance, in Kapolei, on certain areas in the leeward side or central Oahu, where it's already max capacity, and the elementary schools will not have open spaces and unused spaces. In those areas, School Facilities Authority, in working with EOEL and DOE, are locating hubs. So there could be hubs in certain central Oahu or in the Kapolei area or in urban Honolulu, and they'll be building hubs, and they can be working with either charter schools or they can be working with EOEL to contract out with a private provider. So we're trying to utilize all options. And the beauty of School Facilities Authority, they don't have to build on DOE land. They can build on any state land. They can even build on county land. So they're right now working with the city and county of Honolulu to build something on a city and county of Honolulu land. So the concept of building the hubs is really exciting because we're changing the narrative and changing how we view schools. Traditionally, schools are where people live, but if you're thinking of 3 and 4-year-olds, these are your babies. And a lot of times they're gonna want their babies near where they work, not where they live. If you live out in Ewa and you work in downtown Honolulu, I mean, you basically gotta leave your house at sometimes 5 o'clock in the morning, sometimes earlier, and you're not gonna leave your 3-year-old in a dark, empty space at a nearby school. So, we're looking at different options that are most workable for the parent.
And just to clarify, when we say School Facilities Authority, that's a state agency tasked with building new preschools and other school campuses, right?
Yes. So the School Facilities Authority is something that was created by the legislature in 2020, I believe, and they were tasked in building either public preschools or now they're tasked with building either teacher housing and a new school in Central Maui. So they're specifically tasked with certain items and certain goals.
This question is for Jeff and also anyone. I guess all three of you can probably speak to this. Like you mentioned earlier, the wages for childcare workers and early learning providers are really low. There's a great study in 2022 from UH and RAND that found that I think childcare workers were making just a little bit more than fast food workers at the time, and I'm not sure if much has changed since then. I was wondering, what more can be done to address these low wages? And also, could you talk a little bit more about why it's so difficult to raise the wages of these workers?
It's difficult to raise the wages because it increases the cost of childcare, and somebody has to carry that cost. And are you carrying that cost to the families, or is somebody going to provide some sort of subsidy or support for that. We have to figure those pieces out, and we're working towards them. We've done a good job of beginning that conversation and dealing with it with intention. Moving to 500% of FPL for preschool open doors is one way of doing that. Providing stabilization grants to childcare providers would be another way of being able to supplement that cost without throwing that back onto the families. So there's things that we can do, and it's going to take a multi-prong approach, and we're going to have to figure all those things out. We have a really good dialogue going on, and I think it's really quite productive. So I think we're heading in that place where we're going to figure that out, but it's going to take a lot more time because they're very, very difficult, complex issues.
Yeah, and from the federal level with Head Start, even with over the last 10 years, we've had bumps of cost of living adjustment added for specifically for salaries. Those do not address at the same rate of inflation, right? So what some programs have been doing across the nation, including in Hawaii, including our agency, is the federal government gives us X amount of dollars for X amount of slots. One way that we can increase salaries is to lower the amount of kids that we serve. So you reduce the enrollment, but you can stretch the dollar to address wage disparity and whatnot. So we've unfortunately had to take those steps. Although we can raise salaries to keep staff, it is at the cost of maybe not being able to serve as many kids as originally planned to and whatnot. The federal government with Head Start gives us that flexibility to do that, as long as we can address, making sure we're still addressing needs. What are we going to do responsibly with those funding, since we're going to be decreasing enrollment and whatnot. And across the nation, that has kind of been what people have been doing, including here in Hawaii.
But in the private sector, you can't do that because your income is based on how many children you serve. So in order to raise costs, you actually have to raise the tuition or the number of children that you're serving. So you have to increase the child teacher ratio in order to be able to support that.
Right. I didn't realize before I started covering education how challenging it is to run a preschool and all the factors that go into it, including, serving families' demand, but also, keeping wages livable for providers and teachers as well. One thing I was wondering was there's a lot of focus right now on expanding access to 3 and 4-year-olds, which makes a lot of sense. But some of our audience members were also wondering what's being done to expand childcare for younger kids as well. That 0 to 2 age, especially when parents need to go back to work and they need to be finding quality childcare for their really young kids in that age range.
So yeah, we're expanding into 1-year-olds, and there's difficulties in doing this, but the idea is that as you move the 4 and 5-year-olds over to ready keiki schools, then you have the room, you have the capacity then to convert those seats into younger children. But in doing that, that means that you have to deal with those changes in licensing, the differences between the two licenses and all of those things. Those are things that we have to work out. We have to have those discussions. We have to start pushing for those kinds of changes so that we can make that conversion a little bit easier. But in general, that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to say, we've got you over here. And now we can have the capacity to increase the services over here.
Yeah, and again, I'll speak more on the federal model with Head Start. And early Head Start is for our prenatal families as well as children up to the age of 3. So as I mentioned earlier, the federal dollars coming down from Office of Head Start for infant toddlers and prenatal families is on about 700 slots. The cost per child for those slots is a lot higher than Head Start, because we know the cost for infant toddler care is a lot higher to operate. So we talked about reduction of enrollment. One of the things that we've done is we've actually moved our Head Start slots to early Head Start to address trying to provide more infant care, infant toddler care, or home visiting. But the barrier, as Jeff has explained, is the workforce piece, is finding, we can make us, if we close a Head Start classroom, we can use that classroom for early Head Start. But is our Head Start teachers qualified to be in that early Head Start classroom? Probably not, because they don't have that the experience for working with children under 2 years old. So it's like for Head Start, we have that flexibility to serve more early Head Start kiddos, and we have, I think, overall, there has been some expansion efforts around early Head Start, and programs like ours are using this internal flexibility to move some Head Start slots to early Head Start. There's also been a few, I think, since over the last 6 or 7 years, there's been 3 expansion efforts from the federal government on expanding early Head Start that some of the Hawaiʻi grantees, as we call them, have taken the opportunity, but it's the workforce piece that's the struggle, especially for the infants and toddlers, because as Jeff had talked about earlier, the experience requirement is that 2 years of experience in a licensed infant toddler facility for children under 36 months. It's hard to get that experience if there's not many places that offer people to actually work in infant toddler care. So it's that kind of like, what do you do first, right? The chicken or the egg or whatnot debate. So
That makes sense. It definitely seems like a chicken or the egg type problem for these, these centers serving really young kids. We're getting a lot of audience questions, especially about workforce. And I wanted to direct one of them to you, LG. Someone was asking, and sorry, I'm just trying to find the question now, but someone was asking, one solution to improve wages and training for early educators seems to be an apprenticeship program. Could you talk a little bit more about what this might look like? I believe there is legislation this year that was trying to start an apprenticeship program for early educators.
Yeah, because of the increased attention around the need for childcare, around the need of preschool education, there's been a lot of focus, in fact, a lot of attention in the legislature and in the community about what it's going to take. I know we talked a little bit about how the state has taken a long time to even come to this point where we're making monumental changes, but it has taken this long because it is a tough issue. It's clearly there's different challenges all over. There's challenges about coordination. There's challenges about workforce, but the fact that we're having this discussion tells all of us that this is an important issue. This is a top of mind issue for many of the families, many of the working families. On the workforce side, the legislature has been terrific when it comes to trying to deal with how do you deal with workforce issues on the private sector. And thanks to many of the partners in this room, they had legislation about different kind of pay differentials or providing grants to private providers, and even apprenticeship program. But I wanted to talk about 2 programs that the legislature supported and philanthropic and private sector supported. One is called the Mu'o Scholarship. The Mu'o Scholarship was a partnership between Kamehameha Schools and Chaminade, and they had 50 slots, and it was a full scholarship, 50 slots for 3 years. And we had always assumed that people did not want to go into this space because wages are low and they don't want to teach preschoolers or they don't want to get into childcare. But the first year that they offered this full scholarship, we were surprised that 250 people applied. And so we were very surprised, and we thought, okay, if we can get rid of some of these economic barriers and challenges and have people graduate with no debt and no school debt that they have to pay back, that's another barrier. The second year of that cohort, 250 people applied again. So it was kind of amazing. And Chaminade was so surprised by the response, and Kamehameha Schools was also surprised that Chaminade offered additional scholarship for individuals who did not qualify for the 50 slots for 3 years. And that's something that is so terrific. The other thing is University of Hawaii, working with Al Castle Foundation, provided seed funding so that any education credits would be completely tuition free. And about, I think, 90 students took advantage, and we already had graduating classes, and they are coming into the workforce in the childcare and preschool setting. So, I mean, I think for all of us, we always have to think about, okay, what are the different barriers and what are some of the challenges out there, and think about how we clear those things, because we always talk about how this is not a situation where we can try to figure out something next year, because by next year, the kids who are 3 and 4 will no longer be 3 and 4, and they're not going to need the preschool services anymore. So the longer it takes for us to address this problem, we're leaving a lot of unserved and underserved kids behind.
Definitely. It's so interesting to hear about the different scholarship opportunities and the way that, the different universities are working together to really try and get more people into the workforce and into the early education classrooms. We've got one really interesting question from an audience member about data and data collection. This audience member was saying that there's current data limitations on the early education workforce that prevent a full understanding of who are becoming early education workers. They're really asking about what the state is doing to build a more robust data system in terms of tracking, tracking who's really serving our kids and where they're located, and in terms of maybe also filling the gaps of who else we need to hire to kind of round out this early education system.
We pull our data from census data because we are very mindful of the birth rates, and then we think about the birth rates to plan out what we need to build 3 years after the birth rate and 4 years and vice versa. In addition to that, we work very closely with Department of Human Services and Patch to gather data from the private sector and what is going on the provider. But, I mean, no matter how much data we pull in, it's really about trying to pull and marry those data together and overlay. And so where do people work? Where do people live? And then where's the workforce? We can build all we want, but if we don't have a workforce in certain areas, like Puna, we're very mindful of where the workers are, and we have to make sure that, hey, instead of just overbuilding and providing these services, we have to make sure we have the workforce, qualified workforce, we have the facilities, and we also have partners that can fill this void.
That makes sense. And I mean, I check the Ready Keiki website fairly frequently, and it's interesting to see when the numbers change and kind of the explanation of why, we may or may not need more seats or less seats, partly because Hawaii is building more preschool classrooms, but also because, like you've explained to me before, the census demographics and data is changing as well for kids who are being born every year. I'm going to open this up to all of you. We had one question asking, and I'm not sure if this data is available, but what is the percentage of public housing units that offer early childhood education? Will they service a family? I guess they're asking also, will these early childhood education programs service families who are working, all kinds of hours or need flexibility because they're working families?
So in regards to hours, expansion of hours is really difficult, and it's hard to find people to man those hours, first of all, and then you have to be able to pay them. And those differentials, those evening differentials and things are really difficult to be able to address. There are ways to do it, but it takes a whole lot of coordination from a whole lot of people to make those things happen. It needs to be part of the conversation, but it's not something that's going to get solved anytime soon.
Yeah, and I might get dates confused, so I apologize in advance. But you know, we were fortunate enough to be asked by Kamehameha Schools. I want to say it feels like it was yesterday, but it really was probably about maybe 5 or 6 years ago. They were working on a development with the Kobayashi Group out in Kapolei to build a housing development and build a preschool within that housing development, which is like, that's genius. Like, every housing development should have a childcare program for the families that are there. And so Kamehameha Schools had approached us to see if we wanted to do Head Start there. And long story short, we looked at data, we looked at our numbers, we also looked at our funding and felt like we needed to find another funding source. Head Start wasn't a really good match in the demographics there. And so right around that time, the Charter Commission had released a call for applications to open preschool only charter schools. And so, you know, our leadership talked about it. We met with Kamehameha School just to kind of understand a little bit more about charter school. What does that mean? We talked to the early learning, charter school early learning director there, Deanne Goya, to also kind of get an understanding. And she had actually approached Head Start programs as, you know, this might be something you want to look into to kind of help with expanding services. So, you know, we're happy to report that we did apply for it as PACT applied for it and put in to open a new preschool in Kapolei, which just opened up. Well, technically we opened up in May, but for a full school year, this is going to be the first school year for the Parkway Preschool out in Kapolei. So it's a beautiful, and it takes partnerships. Like, if Kamehameha didn't call us, if Kobayashi didn't work with Kamehameha on building the facility, all that needs to take place. And we're leveraging charter school funding around preschool to really find creative ways to expand pre-K opportunities, right? Especially in free pre-K because it's charter. So, and in that area, in the Kapolei area that we're servicing, this is the only free pre-K option. The nearest Head Start is up in Makakilo. I don't think there's any, I don't recall if there's any EOEL pre-K in the area. So this is a great option. And 80 slots like that. Like, we got so much good response as far as like, when are you opening? Like, when does this start and whatnot? And we're still getting that response. So yeah, it was pretty exciting. We opened this past week, the preschool open, and it is an independent, it's a charter school preschool, charter only preschool. Sorry. Charter preschool only. I got to get that right. And it is what we have been told is the first of its kind in the state of Hawaii, but also possibly the first of its kind in the nation. So, you know, we're kind of breaking some new ground here, and we shared that with the parents. They were pretty excited when we shared, like, you know, 20 years from, it might not be important to you guys now, but 20 years from now, your kids, you know, they're going to be, you know, going off to college, and they would be a part of the first charter preschool only. So, trying to leverage what's out there, opportunities and whatnot too. So.
Definitely. I remember talking to you guys in January about Parkway when you guys are, I guess, really ramping up for the opening in May. And it was such a cool opportunity because, you know, we talk about charter schools and expanding school options for families, but I hadn't heard a lot about charter school preschools before this. So it sounded like a great opportunity to, you know, expand more free preschool options for families. We got this really interesting question from the audience, and I'm going to open it up to all of you. Someone was asking, what can the average person do to assist this issue? I'm thinking they're talking about the shortage of childcare slots. What about for retirees, especially those who are in educational roles, training for high schoolers to assist, ideas, etc. So I think they're really just asking about solutions that, you know, the average person can really jump on and help out with.
The University of Hawaii has made drastic changes on how you can get a degree in in early childcare ECE degree. Before, to be a preschool teacher, if you can imagine this, it was almost like getting a dual degree because you needed a pre-K to third grade degree plus a K to eighth grade degree. So a lot of people thought, okay, why am I taking a double major degree to work for less money if you were to work in a private sector? And so a lot of people opted not to do the pre-K route because there weren't that many public preschool options, and it was a lot of work. It was a double major. So because of all the things that are going on both in the private sector and public sector, the University of Hawaii bifurcated the degree, and now they have a preschool only P to third grade degree separate from what it was before. So I think they're really trying their best to work on pipeline. Chaminade has always creative solutions about what to do. And there are retired teachers who worked in kind of the K to 12 system or K to eighth grade classrooms, and they did not want to work. They withdrew from teaching only because they didn't want to teach in a certain area. And now that pre-K is an option close to where they live, they're coming back and recertifying and getting into the teaching degree. So we're kind of excited about that. Going back to what Ben was saying, this is really exciting because the fact that both the University of Hawaii housing has a pre-K component, including the early care component, and the kapolei housing, low-income affordable housing, incorporating a pre-K option. We also have a low-income affordable housing unit on Maui, and they partner with the Bezos Academy to provide free preschool option, and that one provides breakfast, lunch, and a take-home dinner for every child. So I think more developers, as they're thinking about developing projects, they understand in order to make their project marketable, they are thinking about, okay, what does my clients need? What do these residents need? And they're openly talking about, okay, should we incorporate preschool option? Should we incorporate childcare option? In my perfect world, I would want a preschool that is equivalent to people's work hours. So, if you work in the hospitality industries, you have to work long hours. So can we have different kind of childcare or preschool options that are open, extended time till 10 p.m. or midnight or over the weekend? So these are kind of the discussions that we are having and we need to have to move the state forward to have us be responsive to what is in need for the population, as opposed to thinking about from the backward way where the government will provide based on what we think, but we should really be providing based on what the population and our residents need.
That makes sense. That's so interesting about the degree requirements from UH. I didn't realize it was so complicated before in the past to get, I guess, to get certified to be an early education teacher. We're just around time, but I wanted to ask you all, is there anything else you wanted to add or anything else you want people to walk away from this panel tonight knowing about early education and what additional steps are needed to get us to our goal of universal pre-K?
Go ahead.
Okay. The cooperation we had among the partners with the Department of Human Services, EOEL, SFA, so many others, Ben, and your leadership with Head Start, and ensuring that we have a charter, the first in the nation of charter, pre-K only charter, is really exciting, and we're doing really exciting things. If people are still looking for preschool options, please go on either the readykeiki.org website or go on Patch website, and Preschool Open Doors is available. Apparently, in the past, before the legislature expanded Preschool Open Doors, made huge strides and provided $50 million last few years. Before that, Preschool Open Doors only served about at an average of 500 families, 500 kids per year. This year, just, it's the beginning of the school year. They already have approved 1,000 applications. Apparently 5,000 applications came in. So you can tell there's a need out there and people want to take advantage. So I know they're going through their application. It's an open enrollment throughout the year, and they are going to build a wait list depending on, who qualifies, who doesn't qualify. So go ahead and continue to apply. And, we just want to thank all of you folks for keeping our kind of the youngest learners top of mind.
We're really in a place where we're actually having dialogue that's productive and we're actually making solutions. It took us a long time to get to this place, but we are getting to that place, and that's really exciting for me. I think everybody just needs to stay engaged in the dialogue, and we're identifying barriers and we're creatively coming up with solutions, and we're experimenting and trying things out. It's one of the things that we can do best in our state, is to keep working together and collaborating together. I think we've finally got a open doors kind of thing going on, and I'd like to see that continue.
I should have gone first because they stole my thunder. But nonetheless, both said, just things that I was thinking about too. I think the working together is probably the biggest thing. The partnerships that we form in different communities, but also it's important for the community members to be part of that discussion too, right? It can't just be administrators like us trying to make decisions. We gotta listen to the community to find out what they need, what's gonna work for them, their community in Hana maybe, their community in Waianae maybe. Just really listening and making sure we're taking that into consideration as we try to build the system. And it has come a long way. I've been in the field for about 20 years. Eyes wide open, not knowing what's going on, but it's come a long way, I want to say. And I think it's making really good progress with the different expansion efforts, the trying new things out, and thinking maybe a little bit outside the box of what we do traditionally. I think, but we got to do that together. I think that's maybe my final landing point for myself is it has to be a kako thing.
That's a great point to end on. Thank you, all three of you, for being here tonight and for the work you're doing for, like LG said, really our youngest learners in the state. Thank you guys all for coming. Thank you guys who are online as well. Please remember to take a pretzel if you haven't already, and check out our booths on your way out. Thank you guys so much. Have a great night.